Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Attlas Information Live. We are happy that you could join us today, and we are grateful that you have decided to take some time out of your busy day to come and spend it with us. As we continue our discussion from last week, when we were speaking about the law of love, the nature of love, and its fundamentalness to the universe, to all creation, that love is the foundation, love is behind everything. And last week we were focusing on the nature of love itself and its application in a practical way, but yet a philosophical, abstract way at the same time. It was more of a philosophical examination of the nature of love. But as we know, love is the foundation of everything, and love is also the foundation of creation, the coming together for the sake of creating something new and something beautiful and something true. And so this week, we are going to be focusing on the practical metaphysical science of that. How does love create, practically speaking? And as beings who are capable of experiencing love, of knowing love, of expressing love, how do we mortals factor in to this grand opera playing itself out in the universe, where love is both the writer and the director and the conductor? Where do we fit in to that grand symphony of melody and harmony? Just what is our role, and what, if any, are the limits? And so invariably, we come to a phenomenon known as the law of three, the creative law of the universe. And we touched on this last week when we were talking about the union of masculine and feminine, the coming together of opposites for the purpose of creation. And the law of three is foundational at all levels of reality, whether we're talking about the positive, negative, and neutral charges of an atom to the coming together of the pollen and stamen in a flower in order to procreate, produce fruit, or indeed the union of a man and a woman, the sexual union of a man and a woman. Because invariably what we realize is that if love is foundational to the universe, philosophically, metaphysically, archetypally, the practical expression of that law of love in the universe is a complementary and related law called the law of sex, the law of three, the law of creation. The universe is sexual. Even if you want to look at the universe from the perspective of Nikola Tesla or Walter Russell, who say that the universe is electric. Well, what is electricity if not a positive charge and a negative charge and a neutral charge? So on every level, from any point of view, from any perspective, you cannot avoid the fundamental tri-unity at the heart of all phenomena. The universe is triune in nature, as above, so below. And the trinity or tri-unity is at the foundation of all spirituality and all forms of religion and all expressions of spirituality. We find the Trinity there, whether it's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Athena and Zeus, and Odin and Thor, and I don't know Odin's wife's name. But regardless, you will find the Trinity in every religious spiritual tradition. The masculine, feminine, and union of masculine and feminine. And we could get into quotes from the Bible and quotes from Genesis about, you know, the Lord hovered over the waters and the creation and all that, all those allegories and stuff. But really today we want to be more practical. And in that practicality, we want to reveal how to work with the law of sex, the law of creation, and do so with the background that we have on the nature of love. Because creation is a power. It gives one tremendous power. And we all know that the duality in the universe, there is positive and then there's negative. There is freedom and then there's determinism. Consciousness and mechanicity, good and evil. There are all sorts of ways in which we can conceptualize and contextualize this duality of opposites. And so we also know that with great power comes great responsibility, because power corrupts. And the power to create does not guarantee that what we create is good, that what we create is beneficial either for ourselves or for others. Unfortunately, we live in a time where, especially in occult circles and esoteric and new age ways of thinking, they have adopted a sort of anything goes mentality. If it can be done, then it's doable. If it's possible, if it's plausible, then it was meant to be. And this is a wholly erroneous way of thinking. But this also happens to be the primary modality by which this humanity approaches sex. It's the primary modality by which this humanity approaches many things, many aspects, many phenomena. That it is, quote, natural. And that if it can happen, it should happen. It was meant to happen. It was meant to be. I mean, after all, it's possible, it's plausible. We have the ability. Why would we not use it? It is a very immature and infantile way of thinking, frankly. Just because you can do something, therefore, you are right to do it. That you are entitled to do it. And what's more, it must be good. It must be beneficial. After all, you have the ability, you have the potential, the capability to do so. The word that is used often is natural. Anything that comes naturally to you, it's part of nature, and we are part of nature. Why would it be bad? Why would nature create anything that is bad? And so we are going to be covering a lot of ground, a lot of different facets. But at the heart of it is going to be love, and how love expresses practically in the universe through sex. The union for the sake of creation and for the sake of destruction. Because as we point out in our book, all acts of creation are simultaneously an act of destruction. Anytime you have birth, you have death. They're two sides of the same coin. And in between them is sacrifice. And we described sacrifice as being fundamental to love last week. How unconditional love brings with it at its very core, what we sacrifice. We sacrifice all of our expectations, for instance, and all of our demands and all of our desires through unconditional love. That's a sacrifice. We're sacrificing an aspect of ourselves for the sake of others, yes, but also for the sake of this phenomenon that we're speaking of, love itself, and its capacity to create something beautiful and something true in the world. So that which is not beautiful and that which is not true must be sacrificed. Because how else can you create something beautiful and something that's true if you are filtering that love through something which is false and something which is ugly? Within that context, we can approach the subject of sex, of sexual creation, the law of three. We have some greetings here in the chat. So let's, Leah says, blessings all. Hello, Leah. Thanks for joining us today. Tiffany says, good day, and thank you for part 2 on this. Much appreciated. You're very welcome, Tiffany. And Benjamin says, hello. Hello, Benjamin. Nice to have you here again with us. So right off the bat, we should not spend too much time on things like electricity or, pollination or all the other facets in nature where positive and negative unite to create. We said this was going to be a practical examination of the law of three, the law of sex. And so let us focus on the human machine, the human being, and recognize that within all of us are a pair of polarities, the masculine and the feminine force. But specifically, the force that we are speaking of is the sexual force. And in truth, the sexual force is feminine in its fundamental nature. However, it has a masculine aspect. Now, in esotericism, we call these forces in the human body, we call them Ida and Pingala. Let's see if we can get our whiteboard up. There we go. So if we draw a human being, we have two energetic channels rising in the body, one masculine and one feminine. The feminine is Ida, Eve. And the masculine channel is Pingala, Adam. This formation, or this orientation, the shape, should be familiar to you in the staff of Hermes or the caduceus of Mercury. This is that medical symbol, right? This is exactly what this represents. The two energetic channels rising up and about the spinal column. The spinal column represents that third channel, the union of the masculine and feminine, and that channel is this actually space in the spinal column itself, and its name is Shushumna. So that's the rod itself. That's the staff of Mercury, the rod of Hermes. And then about which are these two. These are usually depicted as serpents, right? Why serpents? It's the same reason why there's a serpent in the story of Adam and Eve. Because at each point where Ida and Pingala cross across the Shushumna canal, we have one of the chakras. And the lowest level, the lowest chakra, the Muladhara chakra, is the chakra at the base of the spinal column. It's also known as the root chakra. And there we have what we've all heard the name mentioned many times, but coiled 1, 2, 3.5 times is known as the Kundalini. But her full name is Devi Kundalini Shakti, also known as the Divine Mother. So, as we said last week, no creation can take place without the divine feminine. And despite the fact that, yes, there's a masculine aspect in the divine feminine, that's Pingala, that's Adam here, and Adam and Eve are these two energetic channels. These channels are intimately related to their underlying foundational energy, which is Devi Kundalini Shakti. Benjamin says there's a version where it's one snake coiling, but that one might have to do with a virtue aspect. No, okay, so the staff that just has one serpent rising, that is, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. You're jumping ahead, Benjamin. You're jumping ahead. Rest assured, that also has its own meaning, but again, you're jumping ahead. So, well, we might as well just address that because Benjamin brought it up. So, in some versions of the Caduceus, there's one serpent, Benjamin says. Okay, so that one serpent is the Kundalini. When the Kundalini awakens and rises up the spinal column from the Muladhara chakra, rises up to the crown chakra and illuminates all of the chakras and enlightens, enlivens, inflames all of the chakras of the human being, all, and puts them all into activity. And this here at the top, this is the tongues of fire, the Pentecostal fire, the tongues of fire atop the heads of the apostles, the Pentecostal fire. That's a symbol of the risen Kundalini. And the third eye being the illuminated eye, the enlightened illuminated eye, the all-seeing eye at the top of a pyramid, of a tri-unity, masculine, feminine, and union. So this Kundalini is asleep. It's coiled up. It's not in activity. It is dormant. Its two serpents are in activity within us, the prana, or the chi, which you can spell like this. That's the prana, that's the chi. This positive and negative poles, the masculine and feminine. These are related to Kundalini. But the Kundalini itself, see, these are the two serpents, but the Kundalini itself is what happens when the masculine and feminine unite into a third aspect. And it's that third aspect that's represented by the single serpent. Now, biblically, allegorically in the Bible, in Exodus, there is a scene where Moses tells Aaron to cast his staff down. And Moses' staff turns into a serpent. And Pharaoh says, oh, these are the cheap tricks of a temple priest. And so Pharaoh commands the temple priest to throw their staffs down on the floor. And they transform into serpents as well. But Moses's serpent devours the other two serpents. That passage from Exodus is describing what we have drawn here for you, where Ida and Pingala become consumed by Kundalini. Kundalini takes their place, and the two serpents become one, the risen Kundalini up the spinal column. This is the transmutation of the positive and negative, you might say, mechanical creative force as they are transmuted and transformed into the divine creative force of Devi Kundalini Shakti, the awakened, arisen Kundalini. Benjamin says, your illustration reminds me of a verse in the Old Testament scripture, Zechariah chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. We're not familiar with it, so if you want, you can look it up and share it with us, but we're not familiar with that. Benjamin Raphael also says, he, the angel, asked me, this is maybe that very passage. He says, he, the angel, asked me, what do you see? I answered, I see a solid gold lampstand with a bowl at the top and 7 lamps on it, with 7 channels to the lamps. And there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right of the bowl and the other on its left. Where the lampstand, this is the spine, the bowl at the top is the pineal gland, 7 lamps are 7 chakras, and 2 olive trees are Ida and Pingala. Yeah, exactly. And what this is describing, of course, is the there is that lamp, that candelabra, which in the Jewish faith, which is, it's not the Merkabah, it's the we're so terrible with names. Anyway, you know the one that we're referring to. They have that candle. That's exactly what that represents. The menorah. Yes, thank you. That's right. That's exactly where the menorah comes from the Bible passage. It's that Bible passage. And yeah, it's an oil lamp. And so many people talk about, in the New Age, they talk about the Kundalini being that oil that goes up the spinal column and so on and so forth, the cerebral spinal fluid and whatnot and so forth. But the Kundalini is an energy. Jennifer says, are twin souls a physical representation of this process of the 2 becoming one? No, twin souls are there. It's related, but twin souls are not. We'll have to address that a little later or another part, because twin souls relates to a monad and its complement, right? So it's related to all of this, obviously, but it would not be fair to say that twin souls are an exact representation of what we're talking about here. We will get to what is an exact representation of what we're talking about here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're twin souls. It's not only twin souls that embody this. That's the point. So, but it's a good question, and if we forget to address it, remind us later, Jennifer, because we will be getting into that aspect a little bit later on. Very briefly, we should mention there's a lot of serpents going on here, right? And we must not observe these phenomenon in a vacuum and say, this is all beautiful, this is all glorious and wonderful and spiritual and blessed and divine, etc., 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 without recognizing that we are talking about power here. We're talking about the creative force of the universe. We're talking about the Christ descending down, tree of life. We all have the tree of life within us. So if you superimpose in your mind a tree of life here, then it's the Christ descends down and it assumes this primarily feminine form of the Kundalini. It's the power of Christ, but it's dormant, it's latent, but it's power. And it is that power that mechanical nature covets. And so this force, this energy, yes, it can flow up under the right circumstances, up the Shushumna canal. But equally, and far more likely, especially for this humanity, the tendency is for this force to flow down and out. So whereas here we can have an illuminated eye and an illuminated Trinity and the tongues of fire atop the apostles' heads and every halo about the head of every saint and every Buddha, or if the energy flows down and out, it synthesizes and it energizes what is known as the Kunda buffer organ, or the tail of Satan. This energy flowing up, we have this expression, we're going to make some room here, I think, or we'll just find a place. When it flows up, we can say it flows up and Adam, or up and Adam, or up and at M. Up and Adam, up and Adam, up and Adam. Recreating the primordial Adam. And then we have this other expression, down and out. These two expressions directly relate to what we're talking about here. This energy, this power, the creative force in the universe. Energy will flow. And if it doesn't flow up an atom, it wants to flow down and out. It's not that it wants to do that, but the energy will flow, and it will flow wherever and however it's directed. Because that creative power is the creative force behind the universe. It creates all of nature, both natures of nature, divine nature and mechanical nature, are both creations of that energy. And we know this to be true because through the act of sex, you can create another human being. That is, you can create an intellectual animal. If you have sex like an animal, you create another intellectual animal. You create another human-like machine. But that's using this power, this force. And when that energy flows down and out through the orgasm, then the most that you can hope to create is another human-like machine. a baby. However, because of what is conditioning that energy and what is causing that power to flow down and out is a mechanical algorithm known as lust, which desires the orgasm. It uses it desires the power. Lust desires the power. And it uses the orgasm as the temptation. It's the carrot that lust uses in order to feed on our sexual force, to get its hands on our power. It presents us with fantasies and scenarios and the desire itself, and that desire is for the orgasm, for the sensation, for the stimulation, in order for that metaphysical parasite, that aspect of mechanical nature, lust, run amok in us, in order to get its hands on our power, on our energy, which is the creative force in the universe. It's the most powerful force in the universe. And that is why in, again, Exodus, you have the scene where the Israelites are wandering in the desert and they are being bitten by these serpents. And these serpents are low to the ground and they're biting the heels of the Israelites. And Moses raises a serpent of bronze on his staff. Now, bronze is an alchemical union of two elements. So, bronze is copper and tin. Copper is feminine and tin is masculine. And when Moses raises this serpent of bronze on his staff, the serpents that are biting the Israelites flee. They leave the Israelites alone. This, in that Bible story, then, is allegorized the metaphysical science of sexual alchemy, of transmutation, of transmuting the sexual force which wants to flow down and out mechanically through lust as the orgasm, through sexual alchemy, through transmutation, we can raise that sexual energy up an atom. Through the union of feminine and masculine, we raise a serpent of bronze. And that saves us from the biting temptations of lust. So, in other words, there are always two serpents, or this serpent always has two natures. To be or not to be. There are two natures to nature, divine nature and mechanical nature. The nature that seeks evolution in the supernal worlds, and the nature that seeks domination in the infernal worlds. Benjamin says, this is exactly what I was thinking about the downward spiral and context, etc. And Benjamin, the other Benjamin, our other Benjamin says, the desire for the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, orgasm, will waste its power and flow it down to earth. Yes, yeah, of course. But that doesn't mean that Adam and Eve weren't allowed to enjoy the tree of knowledge. They were allowed to enjoy it. They were permitted to sit under its branches and enjoy the tree and get the benefits of the tree. They just were not permitted to eat of its fruit. And the teaching there, the veiled allegory there, is that in sex, okay, we have a choice. It's really quite simple. If you have sex like an animal, okay, the most that you can create is another intellectual well, it doesn't really want to intellectual. What is going on with this stupid thing now? There. So if you have sex like an animal, you can create an intellectual animal. But if you have sex like the gods, you can create a god. Of course, before you create a god, you create a true human being. Because practically speaking, sex, it does have a practical purpose of procreation. And you can create a true human being as opposed to an intellectual animal by practicing supersexuality. You can make a baby. It's called immaculate conception. Because scientifically, it is a scientific fact, indisputable, that a woman can become pregnant during coitus without orgasm. Certainly, the woman doesn't have to have an orgasm in order to become pregnant, but the man doesn't have to have an orgasm either. We've talked about this before, but it's well documented. Many, 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 many children have been born because certainly without the man finishing inside the woman. And that's because in the seminal fluid which gets released during the act of coitus, there are sperm in there. And it only takes one sperm. It doesn't take a billion sperm to impregnate a woman. It takes one. So animal sexuality, infrasexuality, is completely 100% and totally unnecessary. It is superfluous to the existence of true human beings. And to those who say, well, but that's not practical, and this and that, and fertility and blah 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 and this and that, look, our cousin is a hardened Catholic, and her husband follow the Catholic Church's rules around birth control to the letter. They have something like 7 or 8 children. They also don't fornicate. They use the pull-out method of birth control in accordance with the Catholic Church, which means they technically fornicate, but never inside the woman. And my cousin has given birth to 7 or 8 children. I've lost count. I think they've lost count. So those who say that Immaculate Conception is impractical and unreliable, etc., there are plenty of children who have been born this way. There have been, look at all those single mothers and all those high school girls with unwanted pregnancies. And in many cases nowadays, especially if if you watch pornography at all, right? Men nowadays, they have no interest in finishing inside the woman, inside during coitus. They want to do different things with their orgasm. And yet, there are plenty of people who become impregnated, despite the fact that the man ejaculates anywhere and everywhere except inside the woman. And yet, there are still pregnancies. Benjamin says, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. And Tiffany asks, why does the orgasm even exist then, if it hasn't value for an immaculate conception? Well, because animals require it. What drives animals to procreate is not immaculate conception. They're animals. They're innocent. They're not at the same level as we are supposed to be at. This humanity has fallen, so we've fallen closer to the level of animals, but that's not the level that we're supposed to be at. So, and to put another fine point on it, immaculate conception or supra-sexuality would be meaningless, would be pointless without its inverse. Without temptation, there's nothing to overcome. Lust exists because lust is the mother of all desire. They need lust, the desire, the pull, the drive to procreate in animals is the primal instinct to procreate is lust. That's that program. It's the algorithm that's running in mechanical nature that drives animals to procreate. And it's mostly, not always, but mostly driven in the masculine aspect, the masculine aspect of the creative force. That's why you have, and certainly this is the case for mammals, right? But in other species, it's also there, right? Whether we're talking about birds or fish, or it's there's this, like, for example, fish spawn, for example, but look at the social hierarchical structure of wolves, of lions, of monkeys, right? And the situation, or where there's an alpha, or even deer, right? Or other herding animals, where you have the alpha male, and the alpha male fights for the right to be at the top of the pyramid. Why? Because then he gets first pick of who to mate with. That's what alpha status is. It's mating privileges. So this is all, that's lust playing itself out in mechanical nature. And certainly you can see that playing out in this humanity. Like these alpha male status, and these men that have like essentially harems, or any number of trophy girlfriends or mistresses, or trophy wives or whatever, hanging on their arm, and they parade them out in public to show off their alpha male status, to show their virility, their sexual potency, their sexual power. Because remember, the power that people are after is this power. It's the sexual force. There's only one power in the universe, the power to create and destroy. And in the hands of mechanical nature, that's the power to control and to hoard, to gather to oneself, and surround oneself with pretty things and pretty women and so on and so forth. But that's all on the level of mechanical nature. And the desire for stimulation on that level, on the sexual level, that's lust, that's the orgasm. Now Jennifer asks, aren't those two different things? Immaculate conception and the Catholic birth control method of pulling out. Wouldn't the woman need to be a virgin for true immaculate conception? No. Because immaculate conception doesn't mean the woman didn't have sex. Immaculate conception means there was no fornication, which means also there was no, quote, pull-out method. There was no need to pull out ever, because there was no orgasm. Because the man and the woman were practicing transmutation. They were practicing suprasexuality. The point of us bringing up the Catholic pull-out method of birth control was just to point out that physically, biologically, the orgasm inside of a woman is unnecessary to create a pregnancy, because the pull-out method of birth control is the most unreliable method of birth control there is, precisely because of what we are talking about here. And immaculate conception, this notion that Mary and Joseph didn't practice supersexuality, that they never had coitus, this is insanity. This is so what the Catholic Church teaches is incorrect information. It is information based on a dogma and a belief that wanted to make sex dirty in all its forms. And also that they did not understand the true meaning of immaculate. The word immaculate means clean, without blemish. That's what immaculate means. So immaculate conception is conception without orgasm. That's what it means. Yeah, no, of course the Catholic Church calls Mary a virgin, but that's not what virgin means. And virgin birth, it means a woman who has not fornicated. It doesn't mean a woman who has not had sex. It means a woman who has not fornicated. A virgin birth is, again, conception. It's immaculate conception without blemish. And there's a reason why the Catholic Church made this change, made change to the definitions. because supersexuality creates masters, creates gods. When Emperor Constantine appropriated the Christian faith and created the Catholic Church, this was a Roman emperor picking a new religion for his empire, which was beginning to crumble, and he wanted to solidify his stranglehold over the Roman Empire. Well, how can any top-down organization strengthen its stranglehold over an empire by teaching people how to become gods? No, that's not how that works. That's not how organized religions hold on to power. And when it comes to controlling the clergy and the nuns and whatever, imposing celibacy upon them was a way to psychologically essentially abuse them and create a kind of Stockholm syndrome where the nuns and the priests believe that they're married to God, and that sexuality in all its forms is dirty, and that that nuns have to aspire to be like the Virgin Mary, right? You can't have nuns and priests, like the logistical problems that this would have created the Catholic Church from their point of view, from their perspective, would have been a nightmare. Remember, in the dark ages and before, remember, we're talking about a time where castrations would take place. I mean, even going right up into the Renaissance and past after, there were practices of castrating little boys just so their voices wouldn't break, just so they could grow up to be beautiful, beautiful opera singers. So within that context, you can see why maintaining power and maintaining control absolutely depended upon that central authority outlawing the use of the sexual force by individuals, except for the flock, for the sake of bearing children, because children had an economical value to the church and to all authorities, right? Because they have to rule over the people. The more people they rule over, the wealthier they are, the more taxes they collect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So procreation was okay, but having sex for any other purpose than procreation, that was not okay. And rest assured that they spent a great deal of time, Emperor Constantine did, with his theologians, deciding what's getting cut out of the Bible. And that's why we only have 4 Gospels, heavily redacted, heavily altered 4 Gospels. And the over 50 Gnostic Gospels were redacted from the Bible, in which a lot of this information was revealed. For example, the fact that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were married. Well, we couldn't have that, right? The Catholic Church couldn't anyway. And Jennifer says, good info, thank you. She says, I grew up in a Catholic school, and some of these dogmas are deeply ingrained. Well, we grew up in the Catholic, and not just Catholic school, but Catholic Church. So we know all about that indoctrination process, and we know all about those teachings. And like we say, even our cousin in Hungary is a hardened Catholic to this day, and they live by the Catholic dogma to this day, to the letter. So we know this by direct firsthand experience. Benjamin says there's a new movie coming out in March 24th. It's called Immaculate. Maybe you can touch on that somehow. I don't know. We haven't heard of it, haven't seen a trailer. So we'll look into it when we get some more information about it. Okay. So, well, because we're here, we arrived here. Is it fair to say that we don't have to spend any time on infrasexuality? Okay, like, is it fair to say that we don't have to spend time on this? Or does everybody feel confident that they know what this means? Let's put it this way. Something like 35% of internet traffic is dedicated to infrasexuality. We call it porn. If you've ever watched any pornography, like there is no shortage of how-to guides on infrasexuality. There's no shortage. And understanding that what you would encounter in most of mainstream pornography are only the first levels of hell when it comes to infrasexuality. The depths of depravity of infrasexuality run very, 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 very deep. And so we do not feel obligated to spend much time or energy on what is overly abundant in this world, right? It takes, we all know what we're talking about here. But it's the type of thing that, spoken about openly in the quote incorrect way, could get one's YouTube channel canceled. So let's instead focus on the positive and focus on supersexuality. And what constitutes supersexuality, practically speaking. What are we talking about here? We can, by the way, we might as well clarify or add some terminology here. Infrasexuality, okay, is Black Tantra. But there are other forms of, there's Red Tantra, there's so-called Gray Tantra, but these are just euphemisms for different kinds of infrasexuality, different kinds of sexual crimes, really. Crimes against the Divine Mother, I mean. So when we talk about the law of sex, we bring it back to this fundamental underlying truism that we're talking about the feminine aspect of the Christ. We're talking about the Divine Mother. And that how we use and or abuse her determines whether that energy flows up and atom or down and out, determines whether we make of our own individual divine mother, whether we make of her a virgin or a whore. I.e., the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ, or the whore of Babylon. That's what these symbols represent. The whore of Babylon was not an actual woman. And the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ, is, yes, she gave birth to Jesus, but she's also a symbol. She's a symbol of the transmuted divine feminine force, the transmuted risen Kundalini, which gives rise to the Christ within all of us. So if infrasexuality has another name called Black Tantra, supersexuality is, of course, white Tantra. This is also known as sexual alchemy, because of the fact that we are talking about the transmutation of the sexual force. And the prominent allegory in alchemy, in sexual alchemy, is to transmute the lead of ego into the gold of the human soul. That's alchemy. And this was done via the mythological philosophical stone, the seven-sided philosophical stone, or the keystone, the cornerstone. That stone is an allegory for sex, but for supersexuality, a pyramid on top of a cube. That's why in Egypt you have all those obelisks, because those obelisks, because it's a none too subtle symbol, a very phallic philosophical stone. So then, practically speaking, what are we talking about here? We said that the Kundalini is essentially the Christ, but it's contained in nature, but it's the feminine aspect. So this is the feminine aspect. The masculine aspect is in the crown chakra. In Christian terms, it's known as the Holy Spirit. All right, so this is the masculine aspect. When we engage in suprasexuality, in white tantra, in sexual alchemy, and we awaken the Kundalini during coitus, and we work with the various practices that we are going to discuss. We're going to share those with you today. The feminine, the fires of Kundalini rise up the spinal column and unite in the crown chakra with the masculine aspect, with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the Kundalini's husband. This is the divine masculine. The Kundalini is divine feminine. Yeah, we should have written it like this. Divine feminine. And here we have the divine masculine. Now, the Holy Spirit is also a fire. We'll touch on the fires and the waters and so on, because sexuality is also associated with the waters. So we have the sexual waters, but within those sexual waters is the fire. And it's the fire of Kundalini that rises up the spinal column. It's that fire that's being extracted from the waters. The creative waters. So when the fire of the divine feminine rises up and unites with the fire of the divine masculine, the result gives rise to the fire of fires. And the light of lights. In other words, the Christ, which is the divine androgen. Fires of divine feminine unite with fires of the divine masculine. And in that union, those two fires come together to give rise to the fire of fires and light of lights of the divine androgen, the Christ. This is metaphysical science now. This is just like electricity, positive and negative and neutral. This is just like in the atom. This is just like pollinating a flower, right? This is just like making a baby with a sperm entering into the ovum. And the result is the zygote. You have a feminine and you have a masculine coming together. And for a brief period of time, all zygotes, all embryos for a brief period of time are androgynous. They even have a tail. Until through subsequent processes of cell division and complication and so on and so forth, the sex is determined and the unfolding of the embryo into a fetus. But for a brief period of time, they're androgynous. The Christ is always androgynous. It's the Christic force. It's the force that divides into the Holy Spirit and the Divine Mother, the divine masculine and divine feminine. And the divine feminine unfolds the physical universe on all its levels, all manifested reality. So when we talk about suprasexuality, we are reversing the process of metaphysical creation, of divine creation. We're reversing that process. We're withdrawing from mechanical nature back up into our divine nature to give rise, to give birth to our potential as divine beings. That's why the Christ child is born in the manger amongst our animal egos, because we're not perfect. We still have a lot of ego. But if we practice white Tantra, sexual alchemy, we slowly begin to give rise to the vehicles, the vessels, which can allow us to embody the cosmic Christ. So, right now, we are said to have lunar bodies. But in order to give rise to the Christ, in order to become a living embodiment of the Logos, we have to have solar bodies. These are, our lunar bodies they're riddled with egos, which makes them mechanical. This is the lead that we're working with, right? Our egos and our lunar bodies, mechanical bodies, reactive, mechanical, habitual, conditioned selves. This ego personality that we identify as, this mortal vessel. The solar bodies are conscious. Conscious. So if egos are what make us mechanical, and what we need are solar bodies, but the Kundalini, the sexual force right now, is bottled up inside of lust, inside of anger, pride, fear, etc. These are our egos. There has to be a process by which we eliminate these. Because all of this is causing the Kundalini to flow down and out. Through suffering. That's our tale of Satan, by the way. Shaitan, the adversary. If you set yourself to practicing white Tantra, sexual alchemy, and you do not do your shadow work, as we described in the, not last week, but in the previous 3 weeks, the Alm of life, follow your bliss, explore your abyss, and return to base. But doing your shadow work, eliminating the egos, and extracting the wisdom, the knowledge inside, that consciousness that you're extracting is part of the material that's being used to create conscious solar bodies. But moreover, the sexual energy that was being wasted, that was flowing down and out, is now freed to flow up and at them. But if you don't do your so-called shadow work, if you don't work with the Alm of life, if you don't work on the elimination, the comprehension and elimination of your egos, and you just try to transmute the sexual energy, but you don't work on eliminating egos, you end up with what we've talked about in the past. You end up as a Hasna Musan. Someone with a dual center of gravity. Someone who's developing their solar bodies, but because a lot of their consciousness and sexual energy is still bottled up inside of their egos, they're also developing their lunar bodies. They're creating more egos and they're creating themselves with a dual center of gravity. This is called a Hasnamusin, but in mythology, they're depicted as centaurs, half men, half goats. Their upper body is a man, but their lower body is a goat. And in mythology, in ancient times, goats were a depiction of sexual promiscuity, animal sexuality, in other words, because goats will eat anything, and goats will, they have sex like rabbits. Which is why, serendipitously, we're only really getting into this topic now after what we've discussed in previous weeks. Because for anyone to practice Tantra and not be doing the psychological work, they're essentially turning themselves into a demon. Especially if they continue with infrasexuality. So we said we didn't want to spend a lot of time on the Black Tantra aspect of it, but we're sure you've heard through the grapevine, through your travels, you've heard of people bragging about using Tantra to extend the orgasm and intensify the orgasm. And even Sting, the musician, famously once was caught in an interview bragging about how he can have hour-long orgasms using Tantra. The power to create is equally powerful if it's flowing up or flowing down and out. If you're utilizing that energy, that force, for pleasure, for stimulation, to intensify the orgasm, which, let's face it, the only thing that desires that is lust, or perhaps pride. If you pride yourself on pleasing your partner sexually, but certainly, or you pride yourself on being some kind of a Casanova or some kind of sexual tyrannosaurus or something, so you see your the intensity of your orgasm is somehow related to your sexual potency. Regardless, all of these egotistical motivations for harnessing the sexual force for sensations is creating an entity that is going to desire and demand and expect more and more and more and more sensation, and more intense and longer duration and more novelty, etc. And it's just a downward spiral. And this is true because sexual degenerates never stop at a certain level. They keep degenerating more and more and more and more and more. And the more identified and attached they become with their pleasure and their sensations, the more stimulation is required because they get bored. And that's why there are, among certain groups of elites, of very powerful, very secretive, very wealthy elites, we all know there are rings of human trafficking in humans who are nowhere near the age of majority. Let's put it that way. And there are many, many, many other activities that are taking place in relation to the dark entities in humanity that are exploiting the pure, innocent, vital energy of children. So it's all well and good to say, oh, we want to know about white Tantra. We want to know how to practice it. Okay? We have to be humble and we have to be cognizant. We're going to underline this word. How often does this word appear? To say that we are playing with fire is such a profound understatement. We are playing with the fire of fires and the light of lights. We are playing with the most powerful force in the universe, the creative force. It has the power to create gods, and it has the power to create demons. And how we use that force, we have the right, we have the ability to wield that force. It's not barred from us. Free will is an absolute law of the universe. But the knowledge of this, you can understand why it went underground. And the knowledge of this, you can understand why the Catholic Church eradicated this from religion. Because after the fall of the Roman Empire, all of Europe was plunged into the Dark Ages. And what we are exposing you to here today, what we're sharing with you, was kept secret by the Gnostics and other orders of Gnosticism under pain of death because of the very reasons that we're mentioning to you. The power to create is also the power to manifest. There is another word. Let's go back over here because there's all sorts of language around this. There's many different ways of talking about this. The one that we didn't mention until this very moment is magic. There is white magic, and we're going to, because we cannot emphasize this enough. The reason why this teaching had to be kept secret and had to go underground, because in the wrong hands, knowing how to harness the creative force of the universe, in the wrong hands, or just in the hands of anyone who uses it recklessly, without consideration, without conscience, without the guidance of their innermost being. They're just wielding it like a child wields his father's 44 Magnum. This is what we're talking about here. And this is what humanity in the New Age, all those schools of Tantra out there, claiming to awaken your Kundalini, and all the schools of Tantra that are teaching you how to have more intense orgasms and how to have so-called sacred sexuality, those are all 100% schools of Black Tantra. They are creating demons. Period. And like last week, when we talked about the law of love, we're not talking about judgment. We're not talking about oppression. We're not talking about repression. We're not talking about having something forced upon us. Love is freedom. Love is allowing. Love is free will. We're talking about laws like the laws of physics, like the laws of motion, like the law of gravity, like the law of cause and effect. We're not talking about, there's no judgment here. There's no saying something is dirty or not dirty. It's just a fact. The creative force creates. And it has the power to create the virgin or the whore. It has the power to create gods, or it has the power to create demons. It's just a fact. It's a law that's built and baked into the very nature of the universe, the very nature of creation itself. You can create order or you can create chaos. You can create love or you can create hatred. You can create freedom and virtue and altruism, or you can create tyranny and slavery and debauchery and hedonism. There's only one force that's behind it all. It's just how it's being used, consciously and divinely, or mechanically. So this is why we've often talked about Star Wars as being one of the most important of contemporary mythologies, because Star Wars is all about the Force, and the Force has a light side and a dark side. And as Yoda said, on the dark side of the Force, fear, anger, aggression, easily do they flow. Well, there's nothing that flows easier for us in this humanity than lust. Just ask any 14-year-old boy what flows most easily in his life. And if he's not bashful, he'll tell you. Just go look in his sock drawer for the evidence. And just look at our society, just look on the internet. More than a third of all internet traffic is about that particular flow of the dark side of the Force, of black magic, the black magic of using the creative force in the universe to create more darkness and more suffering and more mechanicity. This is the kind of law we're talking about here. We're not talking about judgment or imposing this or rules or anything like that. No, it's just a fact. To be or not to be, it's a choice. It's this way or it's that way. And if you think you can stay in the middle, nothing. In this particular case, there is no staying in the middle. There is no middle way between these two, because we're talking about being or not being. There's no third way between being and not being. This is the most fundamental of all questions, and the most fundamental of all natures of the universe, the natures of reality. What do you create? And the nuance in it is that we are all of us here, in mortal vessels. We're in physical bodies, and we all have egos. And to one degree or another, we're all demons, to one degree or another, because we don't know our higher selves, and we don't act in immaculate, perfect ways. We're not perfect. We're very imperfect. And whether it's fear, anger, pride, greed, lust, or all of the other egos that we have, they're constantly feeding on our sexual energy. And our sexual energy is constantly flowing down and out. Or we binge Netflix, or we play video games for hours, or we gossip, or we read pulp novels, or there's all kinds of ways that we seek stimulation and sensations and pleasure, not realizing that our seeking that and our indulging of that, our overindulging of that, is all using and all burning our sexual energy and creating more egos, the things that desired that sensation in the first place. So the act of creation happens all the time. There's no stopping it. You can't stop creation. Creation creates. It's like trying to stop the flow of water. Water wants to flow. And if you do try to stop it forcibly, confine it and stop it, and you do manage to get water to stop, what happens? It becomes putrefied. It becomes toxic. It attracts all kinds of parasites to it. And you get this fetid pool of dead water. And that happens inside of those who are forcibly become celibates, like priests and nuns, because they believe all of sexuality is dirty now, and they've eradicated it out, they've repressed it, they've suppressed it, they've taken their sexual force, and they try to lead good lives, and they try to lead, but what happens? That sexual force becomes stagnant in them because it wants to flow, it wants to be vibrant and energetic and alive, and so it becomes putrefied, it becomes bitter. And so when it does finally break free from its repressed state, how does it manifest? Well, in the case of nuns, if you grew up knowing about residential schools, for example, the native residential schools in Canada, or you went to a school and you were taught by nuns, you know how vicious they could be, how physically violent, and how ruthless, and how bitter and resentful they were. They were not happy. And in the case of priests, by now we are all aware, or should all be aware, of the worldwide scandal of pedophile priests. Because that repressed sexuality, Jennifer says that's 100% true about nuns. So the sexual energy in the case of those priests, eventually, it became putrefied, it became rotten, and so degenerated that they were buggering the altar boys. They're abusing the altar boys. So you see, there is no happy middle way. As a single person, the answer is not masturbation, because masturbation is just a clever euphemism and another form of sexual degeneration. Masturbation is very harmful, even though the doctors will tell you to do it because they say it's very healthy. It's very harmful psychologically. It's very harmful spiritually, because you're training the energy to flow down and out. No, what you want to do is practice pranayama as a single person and work with the sexual energy by circulating it through the body. So we've discussed this before, but we'll discuss it again. There are many, many, many different practices of pranayama. And we would end up spending at least an hour just going over them all. So rather than do that, we would rather share with you a resource that you can turn to. Hang on a second. It is here. Okay, so we're going to cut and paste the link here as well, but it's also on screen. We'll make it bigger. This is a course specifically about pranayama. It explains a great many things, including techniques. Okay? And, again, this lecture alone is, again, we could do an entire, and we have done entire live streams just on pranayama, just on the nature of prana. So there is another practice which is important, which we've also talked about for bachelors and bachelorettes, right? Singles. These are the rites of rejuvenation, specifically the 6th and 7th rites. We're going to skip over all of these and basically go all the way down to the 6th rite. Okay, it's called the Vairoli Mudra. It's transmutation of the sexual energy for bachelors and bachelorettes, as you can read on the screen. And we just threw it up again. And here, and we're going to put the link also in the chat. Okay. The practice is different for men and women. Essentially, by practicing this particular rite, and it's advisable to do this in order, do all the rites of rejuvenation first and save this for last, because the rites of rejuvenation, you're working with prana, you're doing pranayama, and you are working with your body in these various yogic poses and prayer and so on, and you are already awakening and harnessing the energy of prana throughout your body, and it's like you're preparing yourself for this final rite, which then seeks to stimulate the kundalini in such a way that it awakens, and then you can transmute it. It's an important practice. It's one that not many people know about. People assume that assume that by practicing pranayama, they are awakening kundalini. And people assume that those kundalini schools that are telling you that pay us $200 or $500 for a weekend retreat and we will awaken your kundalini for you, that's nonsense. That is complete 100% nonsense. It's what, if they're doing anything, they're doing black magic. They're doing manipulation of the most precious creative force, and they're manipulating it in, it's not that they're breaking the law, right? We explained it's not that kind of a law. But they're working with the law in a black way, which means the result is only going to be black. That's the way laws work, right? Like the law of gravity. If you jump off a cliff, you're going to fall. It's not that you're breaking the law of gravity. You're working with the law of gravity. But you're working with the law of gravity in a fatal way. You're going to fall. And that's why in Genesis we have the fall of humanity. And that's why all great tragic heroes fall. Because when you fall down, you're going down the downward spiral, you're going down and out, you're going down into hell. That's why it's always the same language and it's always the same allegory. When great men fall, and the higher they rise, the farther they fall. And we have all these idioms and all these expressions for a reason, because this is the reason that we're talking about, we're sharing here. So with those out of the way, because that's, again, we could spend the rest of today just talking about those practices and not get to what many of you have been waiting for. And your patience, hopefully, will not have been in vain, because you know, it's so important. It's so important that all of this be explained and expressed, because if you treat white tantra as a mechanical activity, if you treat the raising of the kundalini and working with the awoken kundalini in coitus, if you treat the practice mechanically, you are only going to be creating more mechanical elements inside of you. And that's the law of sex. How you have sex determines what you create. We talked about magic and black magic, and we talked about manifesting. So you know that oh so trendy, oh so famous and trendy thing that everybody loves to do, right? Everybody's talking about it, right? Manifest your desires. Manifest what you want. Manifest unlimited abundance. Who wants the unlimited abundance? What elements inside of you will have these desires? When you practice manifestation, you are harnessing the creative energies within you. You're using your divine mother, your creative force. But you're conditioning it, you're channeling it, and you're filtering it through your egos who want these outcomes. Wants the new car or the new house or the new job or the new sexual partner. Yeah, you can manifest them. You can use the law of attraction, because remember, we talked about attraction last week. It's an essential part of love, and it's an essential part of sex. Two things coming together. And you can do all that, and it's called black magic. So what is white magic? It's how you have sex, what you use, and how you use the creative sexual force that determines the outcome. So you could have two individuals practicing magic, one of them practicing driven by their ego and their desires, their fear, their lust, their pride, their greed. You can have another one who's also manifesting, but they're manifesting with their heart. They're manifesting from the perspective of their higher self. And every prayer, every visualization that they have is for the benefit of others. And no matter what it is that they're praying for or trying to make happen or trying to manifest or visualizing the world being healed, they always say, but not my will, but thine be done. Or may all this be done in accordance with the law, the great law of karma, which basically says, as for example, as Jesus said in the garden on the night before his crucifixion, and he prayed and he said, God, if it may be so, may this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thine be done. Those are the words of a mortal who knew what he really truly was and what he was about to go, what was necessary for him to go through. But still, the mortal was still weak and fearful, afraid, and still governed by the self-preservation instinct, like all intellectual animals are. But he didn't sit there and try to manifest his way out of the crucifixion. He said, not my will, but thine be done. In other words, he said, may everything unfold in accordance with the law. Here's my 2 cents. Here's what I would like to see happen for the sake of others. So, for example, when you ask for someone's healing, when you pray for someone to be healed, and you can visualize and you can bathe them in gold and blue light coming from your heart, you can sacrifice your creative energy for their sake, for the sake of their healing, for the sake of their wellness, for the sake of them overcoming their suffering. But you do so with great humility in recognition of the great law. And you say, but not my will, but thine be done. So let what is best for this person unfold. And not allow my mortal ideas about what this person needs supersede the forces at work in the universe playing themselves out in that individual's life, because maybe that individual needs to be sick. And we've talked about this. But a black magician never says that. A black magician doesn't care. Black magician only wants to exert their power, only wants to exert their control, because that's the forces of mechanical nature. They are deterministic. They want to impose their will on others, even if they would argue and claim that they're well-intentioned and look, I healed him or I healed her. I'm such a powerful magician. I was able to heal that person from afar. Yeah, but what if it took the lords of karma an entire lifetime to orchestrate that particular illness that particular individual needed to go through in order to pay some karma or to comprehend something about themselves, to get to the bottom of some demon that was haunting them? And then you come along and you heal them without any regard to any of that, because you want them to be healthy. So you come in and you impose your will against the will of God. You have the power. There are lots of black magicians out there doing exactly this. There's lots of people manifesting all kinds of wealth and power and fame and fortune. And look at them. They're absolutely miserable. They're in hell. But they have their power. They have their control. They're using they become masters at using the creative force. But all of this is so important. And how many times have you encountered discussions around sacred sexuality, and none of this was ever revealed or ever even touched on? It's like going to a gun show instead of a gun safety course first, right? It's like going to a racetrack and climbing into a race car before you've had a driving lesson. Again, it's a child wielding a .45 caliber of their father. And they're doing so completely like children, immature, like children. But they're wielding that gun like they're Rambo. Okay. So we've covered Manifesting, we shared the links with pranayama and the rites of rejuvenation. Okay. Now, what if you find yourself in a loving relationship with someone, and you just click with them, you connect with them on, like we described last week, on a mental level, on an emotional level, and certainly on an energetic, physical level. There's chemistry there. And maybe you found that out just by holding hands with them and walking in the park. Maybe you went swimming with them, or you started wrestling, or you danced with them. That's one of the beautiful things about dancing, is that real dancing is that you can immediately determine whether you have sexual compatibility with someone. It's if you know what you're doing, if you know how to dance, and if you're not awkward and worried and afraid and shy and all these other things. But if you're with the right person, you won't be that. It'll be like putting on an old, well-worn slipper, or your favorite sweater. When you meet the right person, it's that kind of a feeling. Yes, there might be sparks and excitement and jubilation and all kinds of other things. So maybe it's like you found your favorite sweater that had been lost for 10 years. and you found it. You thought it was lost forever, but now you found it. So when you meet someone like that, and you have all these affinities, and you recognize that you belong together. I don't think we need this right now. How do you proceed? Practically speaking, well, we're not going to give a lesson on the birds and the bees here, because everyone should know about the basic mechanics. But if what we are talking about is uniting with another monad, with another soul, another human being, for the sake of the creation of our higher selves, then the sanctity of the act is one we should pay special attention to, and pay more than just lip service to. So we can begin by preparing ourselves. Mentally, emotionally, but also physically. You may wish to take a shower. You may wish to feel yourself as clean as you can make yourself. You may wish to not just take a shower, but put on some beautiful but mild perfume or cologne. Not overpowering, but just use some scented oil, use some essential oil. You may wish to anoint yourself in that way. And there's no particular substance here that we're talking about. There's no formula here. There's no recipe book. This is something that you decide. You decide and imagine yourself stepping into a temple of love in the ancient world during the Golden Age. And you and your spouse to be have traveled hundreds of miles potentially to this temple dedicated to the Divine Mother, to learn the practices that what we've been talking about today. And what we are talking about, what we are getting into. So how would you want to prepare yourself for this, what is the highest yoga, the highest form of yoga there is, the highest practice, the highest rite, the highest ritual there is? This is, let's face it, all the social trappings of marriage aside and weddings and all that stuff aside, no, the union between man and woman, that's what the real bonds of marriage are. And what's more is, as we described, we're talking about reuniting the divine feminine with the divine masculine, Devi Kundalini Shakti and her husband, the Holy Spirit, to give rise to the fire of fires and light of lights. This is mythological in scope and scale. How do you wish to prepare yourself for that? For our part, it's actually something that we picked up in Japan. In Japan, it's a cultural thing that before two people make love, they shower. Now, Japan is a country of hypochondriacs, but it's actually can be quite a pleasant experience to shower with your lover and prepare for a sacred union through a shared act of cleansing and washing away all the cares and the troubles and all of the dirt and the grime and the negativity and everything that's been accumulating on you during the day, or wherever you've been. Or maybe you spent the day together, maybe you went to a party or a dance or whatever, and you're hot and you're sweaty and you're all these other things. It's an actual shower, an actual cleansing, and doing that in a very tender and loving, and let's be honest, an erotic way, can prepare a couple in multiple different ways. But there's that element of cleansing and preparing oneself mentally and emotionally for a truly sacred act in a truly sacred space. Jennifer says that's called sacred marriage, hieros gamos. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about matrimony. And why not try to make it the perfect matrimony? As Master Samael, his first book was entitled that. So you've cleansed yourself, your physical temple. Maybe now what about your temple? The sacred bedchamber. The first thing that comes to mind is light. Light a candle. Just one, if nothing else. You don't have to fill the bedroom with 1,000 candles. It's not the Phantom of the Opera. But if you want to have more candles, light more candles. This is your temple. This is your sacred act, remember. You are the priestess or the priest. We're not making that up. That's not hyperbole. This is a fact. This is the origin of priest and priestess in religion and all spirituality. The priest husband and his priestess wife who engage in the highest, most important, most sacred rite and ritual that exists, period. End of story. Nothing else comes close. Nothing. So, you, the priestess, and you, your priestess wife, or you, the priest and priestess, and your wife and or husband, is one of you responsible for lighting the candles, and the other one is responsible for, I don't know, choosing the music or lighting the incense or putting the drops of essential oil into the diffuser or cutting the cut flowers and arranging them in vases? What are all the ways that you, as priest and priestess, can illuminate and heighten the level of love in the air, in your sacred space, in the bedchamber? You will want to make sure that the sheets are clean, that they've been laundered recently, that the bed is made, that the bed is inviting. And when it comes to sensuality and there is any number of activities that the priest and priestess can engage in, obviously prior to engaging in the actual act. There's sensual massage, there's kissing and caressing and all the other things that, again, I don't think we need to instruct you on any of that. But what you may not have ever thought about or performed together as part of your sexual union with someone is prayer and meditation, mantralization, giving thanks, giving tribute to your Divine Mother. It is a very interesting phenomenon when the first time we engaged in white Tantra, when we led the prayer, that we just knew, and we knew spontaneously what to say. It just came up from us, and we led our partner, and we would say a line of the prayer, and then she would repeat it, and something like, we're paraphrasing here, "Holy, blessed, divine Mother," and then she would repeat. So if you hear us saying pauses, it's because we're giving time for our partner to repeat. You want to say prayers together, but that's not memorize something and say it together. So holy, precious, divine Mother Kundalini Shakti, we thank you for this grace, for this opportunity to work with your sacred waters and sacred fires. Rise, mystic Mother. Rise from your den in the Muladhara chakra. Rise up the Shushumna canal of the spinal medulla, illuminating all of our chakras along the way, and unite with your husband, the Holy Spirit, in the crown chakra, and awaken us, enlighten us, enliven us, illuminate us with and so that your sacred fires can unite with his sacred fires and give rise to the fire of fires and the light of lights of the cosmic Christ. But it doesn't have to be those words. You also have the Our Father. You also have the Hail Mary, which you can say together if you both have them memorized. And when would you say this? And why would you say this? During the act of coitus, especially, and the reason why the man leads this, generally speaking, is because, generally speaking, it is far easier for the man to reach orgasm than it is for a woman. And one of the things that we're going to mention here is white Tantra. We should never approach sexual alchemy with the idea that it's going to be an easy activity, because most of us have spent a lifetime conditioned and conditioning our bodies to have our sexual energy flow down and out. We've conditioned our psychology, we've conditioned our mental body, our emotional body, and our physical body to expel the sexual force, particularly men. Women as well. We say particularly men, not least because we are one, and that's our experience, but also because we know men. And it is the nature of it's the nature of the masculine, after all, to ejaculate as he does. And so it is not easy to modulate maintaining arousal without going too far, and also modulating and moderating the level of arousal, the level of excitement, without going too far this way where one loses one's erection, one loses one's arousal. There's an upper limit and a lower limit, and in between there's space to play, as it were. It's like any dance, right? You can't get too excited or too over the top, because you and your partner are gonna fall on the floor. But you also can't just be a couple of loosey goosey whatever over here, because then the dance becomes flaccid and empty and lifeless. So we have to light the fire, but not allow the fire to get out of control. And we also don't want to have the fire die down. So when the fire starts getting on the big side, on the large side, and the man starts to feel himself approaching a danger zone, if you will, then it's good to slow down, not stop altogether necessarily, but slow down and then say a prayer. That's a moment of prayer, because see, you want to stoke the fires and then transmute the energy. So you're raising the energy, and then you're like skimming off the top. And then it's this continual process of stoking the fires and then transmuting. And prayer is part of that transmutation. Now, what's amazing is that you will feel this, particularly if you're a man. as you get more energized and aroused, you will feel the physiological changes and the emotional changes, the heart rate, and all the other symptoms that you are getting close. And then when you do a prayer, all of those will subside as the energy is being transmuted. Because the energy right now, let's face it, we have to be honest, it's in lust. It's in that mechanical aspect of nature. No one can deny that becoming sexually aroused is a mechanical process. No one can deny that. So the energy is bound within these sexual processes, and you have to work with the physical mechanics of lovemaking to allow the energy to bloom and blossom, so that you can then transmute it through prayer, but also through mantra. The mantras that we recommend, the mantras that we use, are E, A, O, and Krim. Krim. Now this R is supposed to be rolled. And it's the way this is pronounced is, so we can't roll our R's, so we can't demonstrate it for you. But it would be phonetically, it would be something like this. Kareem. Krim. E-A-O, that should be straightforward, right? E-A, right? O, okay? You can also use Aum, but E-A-O works. Aum works as well. Like, you know what? You will probably find other mantras as well that you will find from different sources. So we're telling you from our experience what works for us. But of course, Krim doesn't work for us from the standpoint because we can't roll our R's. So we mostly just use E-A-O. But again, when you're doing this mantra with your partner, because it's better to do it together with your partner, you don't want to overdo it so that you transmute so much energy that you lose your state of arousal. Because if you lose your erection, if you go completely flaccid, you lose your erection, that's it. Your session of White Tantra is over. Not because you couldn't regain your state of arousal, but because if you do that, if you lose your erection and try to regain it through some more foreplay or whatever, etc., you're putting yourself in the danger zone of upwards of 90% or more probability that you're going to fall, meaning it's going to end up in an orgasm. By the way, that's what we mean when we say fall. In the context of Tantra, to fall means to have an orgasm, to lose control, to get pushed over the limit. You know, this is not easy to do, especially if you've never done it before. To be able to modulate between those limits, the upper and lower limits, as we described, and maintain an erection, but not get so excited that you end up having an orgasm. This is, we say, easier for women to do because they don't suffer quite the same way as men do in terms of physical control of holding back their the orgasm, because it's generally speaking harder for women to orgasm. But that's not to say that it's easy for women to be able to modulate their own state of sexual arousal. Because if the woman goes cold or she goes dry, these are other issues that couples run into, including there's also the issue of blue balls, which is of terrible can be a very, very, very painful for condition. And the only solution that medical science has for curing blue balls is they tell the guy to have an orgasm, to go to masturbate, because the blue balls is a condition where the sexual energy has been aroused for too long. But the case of blue balls happens when the session of white tantra goes on for too long. There's too much arousal and not enough transmutation. Because sure, technically, because we're talking about, if we want to use an analogy of burning coals, hot coals, the difference between white tantra and typical sexuality is the coals flaming out in minutes versus being lit and the slow burn of hot coals for hours. And you can do that in tantra. But if your body, your energy body, your vital body is not used to that, then you end up with such a wicked case of blue balls. And of course, you can't masturbate as a Gnostic, because you will undo any benefit that you got from the white tantra if, to cure your blue balls, you then masturbate. You've undone everything that you accomplished during the tantra. So it's better to start off in a humble way, in a simple way, because look, for most people, if they make love for half an hour, that's for most people a great achievement. For some people, 5 minutes is an extraordinary achievement in terms of longevity. So you don't have to begin by going 3 hours, right? That's you're going to end up just like if you've never exercised before, if you've never gone running before, and you go out and you try to do a 3-hour run, you're going to come back with the worst case of cramps. It's the same thing. We have to be practical, right? We're not going to be masters of white tantra the first time we try this. And in fact, there's a very good chance, man or woman, that you will fall the first couple times, or that you'll have difficulties as a man maintaining your erection, that you'll run into some sexual dysfunction or some other issues. So be patient with yourself and be kind, especially also to your partner. This is for the ladies especially, okay? That this is not easy. This is not easy for a man to retune his entire sexual organism, which since the age of 14 has been conditioned and has been geared through pornography and through everything else, and through even the medical system telling him to masturbate as often as he wants, whenever he wants, because it's good and it's healthy for him, to now switch over into a modality where he has to try to maintain a high level of sexual arousal without losing it. This is not easy to do, and it's it can lead to, especially if the individual involved suffers from fear or anxiety or self-doubt or any types of, like, there's all kinds of egos that can come into play, because the egos love to take advantage of sexual dysfunction, of, when we slip up and fall, the egos are there to pounce on us like vultures on a carcass in the desert. And rest assured that if you are with a loving partner and who's desperately wanting to create this beautiful sacred rite, this highest yoga together with you, his mortal self and his pride as a man is going to get wrapped up in that. His ability to perform is going to be completely different now than what it used to be. But still, that impetus to perform and to be a man and to be right, to please his woman, even though in this particular case, the outcome is not that he's trying to make you orgasm, but the outcome is to create this beautiful, loving, magical experience. And if he fails to do so, or if he falls in his attempt to do so, or if some other dysfunction causes him an inability to do so, he is going to have a very likely the same type of psychological fallout from that as he would in any other sexual encounter, like in conventional sex, as if a man suffers from sexual dysfunction or impotency or whatever the case may be, right? Premature ejaculation or whatever. So we're sharing all of this, and we share it with some trepidation, but no shame, because we're here to help you from our own experience, but we are sharing this from experience. And this is and for the women as well, although we can't speak with the same authority from the female's perspective, the female's point of view, because we've only been spectators in that department. But a similar thing applies there. And it's something that you should not expect, like anybody getting on a horse for the first time. You're not going to ride that horse like Gandalf rides Shadowfax, right? It's not, you're not going to be Tobey Maguire in Seabiscuit, right? You're going to be, that horse is going to throw you from its back. It's going to happen. And when it does happen, the important thing is to remember that love is severity and mercy. The lords of karma are merciful. The masters are merciful. They've all been there. They've all gone through it. They know how difficult it is. So nobody's being judged, and nobody's going to be punished because they did their white tantra wrong, or because their white tantra turned into black tantra by the end of it. So this is all important to know, and important as you embark on this new level of creation, because that's what you're doing. It's a different level of magic. It's a different level of creation. You're creating solar bodies. You're creating a God within you, a newborn Christ, the innermost intimate Christ. And as a mortal, there is, of all of the responsibilities that we have, right? It's very easy for this one to become like a huge monkey on our back, right? This enormous responsibility placed upon our shoulders. And so the more you can, together with your partner, put yourself into a place of ease and of meditation and of truly loving and love making. We've often said that this is where the term love making comes from. You cannot make love while fornicating. You do not make love while you fornicate. You don't. You create lust, and or you create a baby. That's what you create. To literally make love is you must transmute the sexual force. You must use these mantras, you use prayer, and you use visualization. And you can use breathing. You can breathe together in unison with your partner as if you were both doing pranayama. And you can breathe and feel the energy rising up through your spinal column into the crown chakra. And then if you do that in unison, and then you touch foreheads, or you kiss, and you do this on a rhythmic way, like the tides ebbing and flowing, while you are making love, you are literally making love. And like pranayama, you can move the energy up to the crown chakra, and then afterwards down into your heart, and you can press your heart close up against your partner's, heart to heart, making love and transmuting the sexual force. And you may feel things that you have never experienced before. But, and this is, again, something that no one will tell you, because they will tell you in the new age how beautiful it is and wonderful it is, all the different places in your body where you can have an orgasm. You don't want to get carried away, because yes, you can have an orgasm in your heart. You can have an orgasm in your head without spilling the waters, without actually having a physical orgasm. You have an energetic orgasm. Oh, and it feels incredible, and it feels magical, and it feels all these things. But guess what? You're taking the sexual energy, and the energy is being released in that spasm. Because the sexual energy isn't released in the bodily fluids. That's not what we're talking about. So in the new age, when people teach sacred sexuality courses and Tantra and whatever, and they tell you about you can have orgasms in all the different parts of your body, and we'll teach you how to have orgasms everywhere. They're teaching you how to do black magic. They're teaching you how to lose the sexual energy and turning yourself more and more and more into a demon, body part by body part, by allowing lust to get into different body parts and get overexcited and overexuberant. Remember, it's like you're barbecuing a steak. You don't want the flare-ups. You want the nice hot coals. So this overexuberance, overexcitement is to be moderated and modulated. Now, what if you do find yourself going over the edge, and you know you're going over the edge? Now, what do you do then? Well, there's a technique for that. And the technique is a half mantra that comes from a practice of pranayama called Hamsa. So that's a mantra that we can use in a pranayama. In pranayama, if we were to draw the spinal column, okay, what we do in pranayama is we raise up the prana on the inhalation, and mentally we would say Ham, and then we visualize the fire atop the head, and we do, so this is Ham going up, and then at the top we make the sound like a burning flame, like the hiss of a flame atop our head, and then we release it down into the heart with a sa, Hamsa. So this is in pranayama. This is called the Hamsa pranayama. So why do we mention this? Because if you are on the verge, if you've crossed the border, there's no turning back. You know your body, you know how it feels. right before you're going to have an orgasm, and you're right there, just on that border, or you've just passed the border, there is a possibility, there is a chance for you to recover from that. And how you recover is out loud. First of all, you want to clench all of the muscles around the pelvic area, and so you want to physically cut off the potential. This is especially for men here, we're talking about now, for actual ejaculation. You want to squeeze all of your muscles to hold back the ejaculation, and then very, very rapidly you do the hum sa, but not the ah part. So it's hums 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 hums. Okay, so it's like you're hyperventilating, really, and it's and visualize like you were doing the pranayama. You're drawing the energy up the spinal column and around the top and into your heart. And this is actually and the emphasis is on the breathing in part, and the S part is the squeezing and the directing into the heart. It really is like like you're just like a pump and a suction, sucking everything and the energy and everything back up and atom, right? Up and atom, up the spinal column. And it's hums, hums, hums. And this is vigorous. So it's hums, hums, hums. We of course are not doing this justice, but then we don't have the intensity right now. We don't have the urgency to do it perhaps the way you end up doing it. But this is what you have as your like your emergency backup plan, or fallback plan, if you find yourself going too far gone. But it's effective. It's effective. Not all the time. It's not. There's no guarantees, but it can be very effective. A couple quick comments here that we should get out of the way. Benjamin says, "Yeah, that's very real. Maybe it's something like a drug addiction." I think he's referring to the orgasm or or masturbation. And Benjamin also says, "Is Aum the sound God made when He made the universe?" In a word, yes. But is it the only one? No. But yes. It's the Aum of life, and Aum is the mantra of the heart chakra, right? All of the chakras of the lungs, right? The thymus gland and the heart and the solar plexus and the sexual organs, because the heart chakra is an enormous chakra. But the other mantra that God would have used would have been the mantra that we use here, is Iao, which is the crown chakra, the third eye, and the thymus gland and the heart. So you may have heard the chakra, You may have heard the mantra E-A-O-U-M-S. This is James, the brother of Jesus. Because Iago, right, is James, and E-A-O-M-S. These are all the primary mantras. Some people do it like this, E-A-O-U-M-S, right? Because they do it in order. But there's no particular reason why you have to do it in order. And besides, the throat chakra, right, is very related to the sexual organs. So it's properly located in the order here between the sexual organs and the root chakra. Because, again, we shouldn't have to say this, but the mouth, the oral cavity, is related to sexuality. Obviously, we should not have to spell that out, because it's the creative verb, right? It's how we create. Even God created with the Word. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And we create with prayer, we create with mantra. And that's why we should probably take this moment to, a lot of you won't like a lot of you will not want to hear this, because, well, for obvious reasons. But when it comes to infra-sexuality, oral sex belongs down here. A lot of you will not want to hear that. But that's where oral sex belongs. Because there is no way to rationalize your way out of this fact that the sexual energy flows in the wrong direction during oral sex. There's no avoiding it. There's no getting around this fact. Oral sex is motivated by lust, fear, and pride. Because fear is control. And oral sex has no spiritual benefit whatsoever in terms of raising kundalini or awakening kundalini, or oral sex really only has one outcome. It really only has one purpose. And that's to stimulate, and that's to lead to an orgasm. And all the other psychological and pseudo-sexual dynamics taking place between the couple via that practice, all the mind games and all the other stuff that's going on and taking place. So it is it is what it is. It is what it is. But what we said here about the mantra related with the throat is, the throat is highly sexual in nature. We create, we sing, we speak, we create truth through our voice. And we also receive, because the throat is the esoteric ear. Benjamin says, it's more inspiring to practice the mantra or exercises knowing that. And Tiffany says, well, for sure, absolutely. Well, look, it's not by accident that we are here teaching the Aum of life, the analogous ultimate methodology, and it is Aum. So yes, absolutely. And not only did God create the universe that way, what we've taught you time and time and time again is that he continually creates the universe that way through us, through all of our actions, through our living the Aum of life in the resonant vibrations of that. We are creating the universe, and we are creating reality through the Aum of life, and all phenomenon are coming into being or out of being through the Aum of life. This is why we said in the short answer is yes, God creates the universe through the mantra Aum. But that's a kind of a simple, simplistic way. It's much more elaborate and voluptuous than that. But it still comes down to the Aum of life. It still comes down to that spiral shape that you see in our logo, right? the Christ that upholds Aum. Tiffany says, I had a feeling oral sex was purely a sensational act and not that of divinity. I mean, think about it. For one, what do we biologically do there? Emit waste from the body. On that note, okay. So, if we, so yes, it's on the one hand that's true, and then this, by the way, when you mention, Tiffany, emitting waste from the body, we hope it also goes without saying. Now, this won't be as difficult for many, but we can also put down here, right? This is not that, we'll be honest, right? This one's tough for us. I'll tell you why. Because this, we've told you many times what we live with. Okay? We know for a fact, just like, we know we know who and what wants this. We know who and what, and we know, like, if you're a Gnostic and you're practicing scientific chastity, which means you're not fornicating, you're not masturbating, and if you're single and all you have is pranayama, no matter what, you're going to be accumulating a lot of sexual energy within you. And what happens is we have wet dreams because succubi come in the middle of the night to fornicate with us, to steal our energy. Succubi are entities, jinn basically, in the fourth dimension, mechanical entities, parasites. They're also known as astral larvae. They come the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and they feed on men. And what do? 99 times out of 100, 99% of the time, they come and they perform oral sex while we sleep. And you dream about it. And you dream about, this scenario playing out. And because they know that's the quickest, easiest way to get what they want from a man. That's also the quickest, easiest way for a woman to orgasm, albeit, in fairness, it's a clitoral orgasm, not a vaginal orgasm, but regardless, there are many women who can't orgasm any other way because of the level of sexual degeneration that they're in. That's the only thing they have left is oral sex. Is there anything that we've forgotten? That's what we're trying to determine now. We've covered that. We talked about manifesting. We talked about, okay. Oh, yes, of course. How do you know when to end? How do you know when to stop? If there's no orgasm, how do you know when it's over? Your session of white tantra. You know when sex is over. You know when fornicating is over. That's obvious. If you're transmuting the sexual force, the man, and if he's not, he won't lose his erection. He will maintain his erection, but that erection will get smaller. It will become smaller. It will become less turgid. It will become softer, in other words. But he won't become flaccid, because he won't be releasing the sexual energy. He's going to be transmuting it. And transmutation is a slow and steady process, right? But it's incredible to experience. When you begin at your, at the risk of sounding crass here, but it is what it is. You begin, full size and full rigidity. And during the course of your prayer and your mantralizing and your kissing and your lovemaking and doing the ebb and flow, right, and building up and transmuting and building up and transmuting, but keeping within the safe zone, eventually you will reduce down to half the size that you began with. And even smaller, but you'll still technically have an erection. It's just because the energy is being transmuted, not wasted, not lost, not spent. So you don't go flaccid like after an orgasm. No, you still have an erection. You're still aroused. You just don't have as much energy to work with anymore because you're transmuting it. So eventually you and your partner just come to a point where you're still engaged in coitus. You're holding each other, you're looking at each other, you're staring into each other's eyes, and you're kissing and you're caressing and everything else. And you basically just say, are we done? Are you think, and your partner will say, I think we've, we did. It's an interesting thing. You just decide that, okay, we had a good session here. We did good work. We had a beautiful experience. And it just tapers off, really, because as the energy is being transmuted, and it's all in your heart, and your hearts will be glowing, and you'll be so filled with love, and lust will be so far from your mind at that point, and it'll just be this beautiful, tender moment that you share with your partner, and you agree that, okay, that's, we're done now, and you withdraw, and then you do whatever you normally do, following this type of thing. You hold each other and do whatever you do in those moments of intimacy after completing the act. Only you've completed the act, but you've transmuted the energy. You haven't expelled it, so there's nothing to clean up, to be crass. There's one other thing you want to do, though, and it's something that we've shared before, and we share it again because it's important. Anytime you do any type of spiritual practice, you want to perform. Hang on a second. You want to perform the macrocosmic star. And if you don't know how to do it, that's why we're looking it up here. Really? It's not in the glossary? No, that's not it. Okay. Anyway, give us a minute to look it up here. But anytime you finish any type of meditation or any type of spiritual practice, it's good to seal your work with the macrocosmic star. Here it is. Okay, it's the pentagram, and it's the tetragram. But there is a way to perform this physically, and here it is here. Okay, so we're going to share this link in the website. We would show it to you, except we can't because we're sitting in a chair and we don't have, the zoom factor on our camera. We'd have to have a separate camera set up and so on to be able to show you this. But there is a video here on YouTube that that shows the macrocosmic star. And we can even there. So you say Klim, Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana, Vayavaya, Swaha. Okay, you can watch this on your own time. You can read all the explanations, but this is something that you and your partner can do following White Tantra. It's recommended. It's beneficial. In fact, this is something you should do when you do your meditations, or if you do your mantra work, or do runes, or any other practice of any kind. The macrocosmic star is a good way to complete your work. Tiffany says, can't we release this built-up reservoir of energy through creating things or being of service, expending the energy in other ways? Yes. Okay. You're not expending the energy, you're also transmuting it by creating beautiful things or serving others. Yes, absolutely. In fact, you will find that that's the case, that if you keep yourself busy with work, like if you're following your bliss, you can only do that with the creative force that you have. It's the sexual energy that you have that you live your bliss with. And if you're meditating, if you're exploring your abyss, right, you're practicing self-observation and self-remembering, that is all using energy. That's all using your sexual energy. Which is why when you're living on purpose, when you're living on point, you won't have a lot of spare energy. You won't have a lot of energy to waste on things like binging Netflix shows or playing video games for hours on end. You just won't have the energy for it. Like, so what we're doing nowadays with these 3-hour, 4-hour live streams, and then we're cutting them into those short videos and we're releasing them throughout the week, and we're doing all our other stuff. And then when we were writing our book, rest assured that we had very few nocturnal pollutions. That's another name for wet dream, nocturnal pollutions. We had very, very few, because like you said, it's exactly as Tiffany says here. It's like you said, we had very little energy left in reserve because we were using it all in creative ways to write our book and to make these videos and to do these live streams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, you're absolutely correct on that point. But remember too, that, see, those are creative ways that you're using your energy. You're transmuting your energy in that way. Like helping others, that the energy is flowing up an atom when you do that. Yes, it's being used, but it's used in a positive way. You can also expend the energy in a negative way. You can do too much exercise, right? You can do too much television. You can do too much gossiping. You can do too much cleaning. You can do too much of anything, and then of course you're just expending the energy, but in a mechanical, not a productive way necessarily. I mean, it's productive from a mechanical, materialistic point of view, but not productive spiritually, right? And Tiffany says, agreed. I feel like I don't want many things I used to since I started pursuing purpose. I like you reiterate bliss here because that's what it feels like. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because remember, bliss, living your bliss is you becoming who you can be, what you came here to be. That's also an act of creation. So this, and it's what you love to do. So it's serendipitous that our 3-part series on bliss, the abyss, and home base, like the diamond and the alm of life, was followed up now by love and sex and creation, because the two things go hand in hand. The two things go hand in hand. And when you think about it, the thing about the pentagram here, and why we practice the pentagram, which is also the tetragram, but the pentagram and the tetragram form 9, but the pentagram and the law of 3 is 8. And 8, the holy 8, is infinity. It's all connected. It's all connected. At this point, the best thing is to open it up for questions or a discussion. We'll pull up our whiteboard here, because we covered quite a bit of ground. That's zoomed out. Are there any questions or comments or anything that you want to know that we haven't covered? Did we answer the questions that you had regarding some of the practical aspects of sexual alchemy, white tantra? Oh, okay. We remember now. We've been sharing a number of links with you on this topic for obvious reasons, but there's more we can share here. No, wait, where is it? Here we go. Okay. So there's more study, more homework that you can do if you would want to do it. Here's the link on the screen, and it's in the chat. Let's see if we can get it in the chat first. There we go. Okay, so this is an article. How should I begin sexual magic? How should it be practiced? This is no doubt going to cover things that we haven't covered, or maybe it won't. Maybe it's a very short article. But it's oh, okay, yeah. Here's what we forgot. When we were speaking about mantras, we didn't mention that one of the mantras you can use, we said Iao, we said Cream, we said this is actually, we don't recommend for this. Remember, in one of the pranayamas, we said one of the mantras was S. Okay, so that's another mantra that you can use, and you will find that in the article that we just shared with you. They mention that, and you will again visualize the energy rising up the spinal column. Because remember, we mentioned that this mantra S is related to this pranayama, the Hamsa, where you inhale and mentally you say Ham, but when the energy gets to the crown chakra, you use this mantra, like the flames burning on the top of your head, and then you send it into your heart. So, and then we also mentioned how your emergency mantra, Hams, 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 it's the S there that has a very powerful transmuting effect. So you can work with that on its own. Just the And again, if you squeeze the pelvic muscles while you're doing that, it has a very powerful transmuting effect. But you want to be careful because it's a very powerful transmuting effect that can, if you're the man, you can quickly lose your erection, and you don't want to do that, as we said, because if you lose your erection and try to get it back, and it's you're asking for trouble there. You're asking for a fall. So Tiffany says, yes, many questions were answered today. I have a better idea how to approach the practice, what practices are ideal to practice, and other practices like oral sex that just aren't in alignment. Leah says, wow, thank you so very much. I really appreciate what I've learned here today. Really looking forward to going through the links you've shared. Thanks again, Attlas. You're very welcome, Leah. Benjamin says, this would work for masturbation, I bet. What would work? And we don't recommend. If you want to do the transmutation for singles, there is a practice here called the Rites of Rejuvenation. It's the Vairoli Mudra. It's the 6th rite. It's right here. Okay. In this practice, if you read this article, and we shared the link, it's in the we shared the link earlier, but here, we'll share it again. Okay. Masturbation is not good psychologically. We do not want to encourage ourselves to become masturbators. This practice is a very specific practice. He says, no, you skipped my comment before. This one? This would work for masturbation, I bet. Which comment? Oh, sorry, Benjamin. Okay, there's a YouTube where a guy gets a brain implant to help him quit opioids. Funny thing, the cure wasn't meant to cure addiction. It was invented to cure Parkinson's disease, neurolepsy. He's been clean since. There's a YouTube video where a guy gets a brain implant to help him quit opioids. Funny thing, the cure wasn't meant to be. Okay, right. Okay. We're assuming that's the one that you missed, and you were saying that brain implant could be good for curing masturbation. Okay, so sorry about that, Benjamin. Now, we talked about the importance of doing your shadow work and when you're doing white tantra. But we came across this. Benjamin reminded us with his comment about YouTube. Is there a way for us to? So Benjamin says yes, it was a follow-up. Okay, no, we see where our mistake was. Okay. Is there a way, when you talk about sacred sexuality and love and white tantra with a partner, is there a way for us to visualize this? Is there a perfect allegory that we can witness what is really actually taking place? That we can comprehend why and how the shadow work connects directly into the sacred sexuality, and you cannot have one without the other. Is there a way that we can prove this to you beyond a reasonable doubt and make it self-evident to you? The magic, the beauty of what the science, the metaphysical science of what we're talking about here. And can we show you this on the material plane, on the physical plane? We think we can. And we would like to show you that now, if it's okay with you, if you have nothing better to do at this particular moment. We're going to make ourselves nice and small here. And you see that? 2 pieces of wood. They were meant to be together. They were meant to be together. They're the same stuff. They're made of the same stuff. They're vibrating the same way. They're meant to go together. They're meant to make something together of themselves. But how? Take some wood glue, take some screws, screw them together, like most people approach sex, right? Let's screw. Let's screw ourselves together and glue ourselves together. Let's get attached and let's make something of ourselves. Let's make a life together. Or what's the alternative? You have to know yourself. You have to know your partner. And together you get to know one another and you begin to see what is superfluous to the what is unnecessary. When we talk about practicing the Alm of life and doing shadow work and getting rid of our egos, getting rid of aspects of ourself which do not serve our higher self, as we're getting into a loving relationship with someone, we want to make something of ourselves together, something of our lives together. There's sacrifice. There's sacrifice involved. There's a chipping away, like the wood turning that we showed you. How many weeks ago now was it? Each revolution of the Alm of life, we whittle away a little bit more and a little bit more. And here you see a master Japanese carpenter, master with his various chisels and his tools, whittling away little by little by little. Yeah, okay. We're good. We're good. Oh, we can speed it up. Right? But look at this intricate pattern, this intricate shape that's emerging. It's like a sculpture. He's not just cutting away the excess. He's very mindful about what he's cutting away and how he's cutting it away. And little by little, not all at once. There's no rush. We have a lifetime together. You and your spouse. Because you're meant to be together. You were made for each other. But it's a process. And each individual has to undertake this process upon themselves. Each individual has to be practicing the Alm of life, self-observation, the self-remembering, the self-awareness, exploring the abyss, observing their defects and vices. And the defects and vices show themselves, reveal themselves in the attempt for the 2 pieces of wood to merge together as one and create and form the shape that they were born to be together, that they were meant to be together. But the pieces that have to be removed reveal themselves in the conflict between the 2 pieces of wood that just quite can't fit together yet. So in the butting of heads and the bashing of heads, the conflicts arise. And that's when compromises are made and realizations are made, and realizations of how we trigger one another. And yeah, okay, this isn't serving us anymore. Not in you and not in me, but we are mirrors to each other because we're meant to be together. We know we belong together. And because we're so perfectly attuned, we show one another that which needs to be whittled away in the alm of life, in self-observation and meditation. And then in the sexual union, in the white Tantra, the energy, the fire is kindled. And in that fire, in that energy, in that movement, those pieces are eradicated once and for all. And then you see how well those pieces fit. But there's still something missing. These keystones, these key pegs that are added back in. These are additional things, new things that we've given one another. And when we hammer those home, one from each, we create this perfect union. And what's so beautiful about this union? No attachment, no identification. We're still two individuals. No screws, no glue. Just a perfect fit and a perfect union of two equals coming together to create something beautiful. That, my friends, is white Tantra and the alm of life. That, my friends, is mastery. There are no accidents, Tiffany. Everything happens for a reason. Benjamin says, yeah, I guess focus a lot on the infrasexuality, not as a finite thing, but as a process of learning. Very nice. But you see, what we just witnessed was in the hands of a master. How many years of practice and apprenticeship did it take him to arrive at the ability to see and accomplish what he just did here? Now imagine what we can accomplish when we too are approaching ourselves and our spouse, our partner, our lover with the same care and attention to detail, and the same respect and honor and patience and focus and concentration. The result of our efforts is precisely mastery. Mastery of ourselves and the creation of a God, the master, one with the Christ, the innermost intimate Christ, the fire of fires and the light of lights, who's the master of masters, the being of beings. Here is a man, a Japanese woodworker, carpenter, who's been following his bliss his entire life. And the proof is in the pudding. And if you want a very, very sexual expression of this, there it is. But at some point in the future, we're going to make a video compilation showing all of this woodworking and wood turning and everything, and showing the world what we see when we see this. This is how we see the world. To us, we see the Alm of Life. To us, we see white Tantra. To us, we see the mastery of mastery. To us, we see archetypes. Yes, we see the wood. Yes, we see the expert handy craftsmanship and all the rest of it. Yes, 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 we see all that. But to us, that's just the surface. That's just the surface level. We get choked up watching this because we see God. We see the world of archetypes. We see Absolute. We see the Christ alive and at work, creating, manifesting timeless universal truths. And we see it embodying it in two pieces of wood. So two monads of the plant kingdom are experiencing Tantra. And we are moved to tears by it. And you can't get a much more visually representative piece of woodworking of Tantra than this. Insert tab A into slot B, as it were. Well, welcome to our world. Look, if there's so few things in life that move us to tears because of their sheer beauty and truth these days. Show us the artwork, the music, the that does that for you. So, but to live a life without seeing the beauty and the truth of the Divine Mother, of God, of Christ, and to live a life without being moved to tears, just of it's, for us, it's a life not worth living. This is how we see the world, we feel the world, we commune with the world because we commune with God. It's this is the level of our clairvoyance. We don't see energy, and we don't see auras and whatnot and so forth. We don't read minds. we don't read people's emotions well. But we see the world on this most fundamental, ephemeral, divine, and subtle level of universal truth. Beauty is truth, and truth beauty. And whenever we see it's just coming together. Like, it's like a miracle, and it moves us. What can we say? It moves us. Call us sentimental. But there you go. There you go. Tantra as Japanese woodworking. And you got to admit that you can't get much more phallic than that. Does anyone have any more questions or comments at all? No? I'll give you a chance to type, but we're trying to think if we have any announcements or anything to mention moving forward. But Tiffany says, I'm good. Thank you so much. Benjamin says, LOL. Well, look, thank you all once again for taking the time out of your Sunday to spend it with us. And we hope you found today valuable. And look for excerpts from today's live stream. Excuse me. In your Facebook feed and on Instagram, because we'll be hopefully getting some good tidbits that we can pull out of here and and share during the week. If you're interested in such things, here in North America at least, Dune opens, Dune 2, second part of Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Dune opens. We're interested to see where he takes it. There's a very esoteric book. So we're not sure. The book is very esoteric, but the film so far, at least part one, didn't rise to the level of esoteric truth like the Lord of the Rings trilogy or something, or the Star Wars trilogy. But you know, it's possible. It's possible that the second part fills in some gaps. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We may go see it tonight. We don't know. But apart from that, Tiffany says, cheers, everyone. Until next time. And Benjamin says, I was laughing at the phallic comment. Well, it is. Hey, listen, it is what it is. It is what it is. That's all we can say. Thank you all once again for joining us. Have a wonderful week. Take care. We hope that we will see you next week. And as always, be well and inferential peace. Take care, everyone.